More than half of Rome's emperors died violently. One was strangled in his own bathhouse by his personal wrestler. One was stabbed by his own bodyguard, mid-piss, on the side of a road. One died in a Persian prison, and his skin was flayed, stuffed, and hung in a temple for 2 centuries. These are 7 Roman emperors whose deaths reshaped the empire and the men who killed them. To rule Rome was to live with a knife at your back. The Senate plotted. The army demanded more money. The Praetorian Guard, the men paid to protect you, often decided when you'd stopped being useful. From the first Caesar to a Sassanid hostage, this is how 7 emperors learned what the crown actually cost. He survived the Gauls. He survived a civil war against the greatest general Rome had ever produced. He didn't survive a meeting of the Senate that lasted less than 10 minutes. By 44 BC, Julius Caesar was dictator for life. He'd conquered Gaul, beaten Pompey, and crushed every rival the Republic could throw at him. The Senate had given him every title they could think of, and a group of senators had decided that meant he had to die. On the Ides of March 15th, Caesar entered the theatre of Pompey for a Senate meeting. Around 60 senators were waiting. Tilius Cimber tugged at his toga. Casca struck first. A glancing wound to the neck. Then they all closed in. 23 stab wounds in less than a minute. Caesar fell at the base of a statue of Pompey, the man he'd defeated 4 years earlier. The conspirators thought they'd saved the Republic. They'd done the opposite. Within 2 years, every man who'd stabbed Caesar was dead, hunted down by Caesar's adopted heir, a teenager named Octavian. Octavian became Augustus. Rome became an empire, and the third man to wear the imperial purple decided he was a god. Caligula came to power in 37 AD at the age of 24. The army loved him. The people loved him. For 6 months, he was the most popular ruler Rome had ever known. Then he got sick. He woke up convinced he was divine. He ordered statues of himself placed in every temple of the empire, including the Temple of Jerusalem. He had senators executed for laughing at the wrong moment. He declared war on the sea god Neptune and ordered his soldiers to collect seashells as battle trophies. He also made one specific mistake. He mocked a Praetorian tribune named Cassius Chaerea repeatedly for having a high-pitched voice. On January 24th, 41 AD, Chaerea cornered Caligula in a palace corridor on his way back from a poetry recital. Chaerea drew his gladius and struck. Then the other Praetorians joined in, 30 cuts. They killed his wife and infant daughter in the next room. Caligula was 28. Rome had now killed 2 of its rulers in less than 100 years. It would never stop. 55 years later, the dynasty Caligula belonged to had ended. The Flavians ruled now, and the third Flavian emperor was about to discover what his own household had decided about him. Domitian was a competent emperor. He paid the army on time. He stabilized the frontier. He balanced the budget after Nero's chaos. By every objective measure of imperial performance, he was doing the job. He was also paranoid, justifiably paranoid. He had a senator executed for keeping a map of the world in his bedroom. He had his own cousin executed on a charge of atheism. By the end of his reign, the entire imperial court was waiting for the knock at the door. His own wife organized the plot. On September 18th, 96 AD, a freedman named Stephanus approached Domitian in his private chambers with a petition. His arm was in a fake sling, wrapped in bandages for days to make the gesture seem routine. Hidden inside the bandages was a dagger. Stephanus stabbed him in the groin. Domitian fought back, clawed at his eyes, screamed for a weapon, but his slaves had been told to remove the dagger he kept under his pillow. The rest of the conspirators rushed in. 7 wounds total. The Senate erased his name from every public monument in Rome the next morning. They called it Damnatio Memoriae, the damnation of memory, as if killing him hadn't been enough. For nearly a century after Domitian, Rome had something almost unprecedented, a run of good emperors: Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus Pius, Marcus Aurelius. The empire reached its greatest extent. The system seemed to work. Then Marcus Aurelius made one fatal choice. He left the empire to his son. Commodus inherited the empire at 19. He was strong, handsome, and obsessed with one thing: fighting in the gladiator arena, as emperor, in public. He fought in over 1,000 combats. He killed exotic animals by the hundreds: ostriches, lions, elephants, sometimes from the safety of an elevated walkway. He renamed Rome after himself. He renamed the months of the year after his own titles. He declared himself the reincarnation of Hercules and walked through the city dressed in a lion's skin. By 192 AD, his own household had had enough. On December 31st, his mistress slipped poison into his wine. He vomited it up. So they sent in his personal wrestling trainer, a man named Narcissus. Commodus had just come from a bath. He was alone. He was strong, but he wasn't expecting it. Narcissus didn't need a weapon. Commodus was 31 years old. The Senate, the same morning, declared him a public enemy and threw his body into an unmarked grave. What happened next was the first warning sign of what Rome was becoming. With no clear heir, the Praetorian Guard auctioned the empire to the highest bidder. A senator named Didius Julianus bought it for the equivalent of 5,000 denarii per Praetorian. He ruled for 66 days. Then the legions of the Danube marched on Rome, and the dynasty of the Severans took over. They lasted 42 years, and 3 of them died violently. The most spectacular of those deaths belonged to a man called Caracalla. Caracalla took the throne in 211 AD at the age of 22, alongside his younger brother Geta. Their father, on his deathbed, had told them to stick together. Within a year, Caracalla had stabbed Geta to death in their mother's arms. He spent the rest of his reign trying to outrun what he'd done. He gave Roman citizenship to every free man in the empire, partly to be remembered for something other than fratricide, mostly to raise tax revenue. He massacred 20,000 civilians in Alexandria for mocking him in a play. He fought on the German frontier, dressed as a common legionary, eating their food, sleeping in their tents. In April 217 AD, he was on campaign in eastern Anatolia. He stepped off the road to relieve himself. His Praetorian prefect, a man named Macrinus, had arranged everything in advance. A single soldier named Justin Martialis approached him. Caracalla never saw the sword. Macrinus took the throne the next day. He was the first Roman emperor in history who had never been a senator. The crown was now something a Praetorian could simply pick up off a corpse and put on. And the next emperor would be a 14-year-old Syrian priest. Macrinus lasted 14 months. Then a woman named Julia Maesa, the great-aunt of the boy who would become Elagabalus, bribed an entire legion to declare her grandson the real heir of Caracalla. They believed her. Macrinus fled, was captured, and was killed, and his own grandmother sold him out to the Praetorians. Elagabalus came to power in 218 AD at age 14. He'd been raised in Syria as the high priest of Elagabal, a sun god worshipped in the form of a black conical stone. He brought the stone to Rome and installed it at the centre of Roman religion. He married a Vestal virgin, a crime that traditionally meant being buried alive. He divorced her. He married a man. He divorced him. He reportedly offered half the empire's treasury to any physician who could perform what we would now call gender-affirming surgery. He served the Senate dinners of camel heels and peacock tongues, then dropped so many rose petals from the ceiling that several guests suffocated. By 222 AD, he was 18 years old and his own family was done with him. On March 11th, the Praetorian Guard mutinied. The conspirators were led by Elagabalus's own grandmother, Julia Maesa, who'd already groomed his cousin as a replacement. The Praetorians found Elagabalus hiding in a latrine of the imperial palace. They dragged him out. They killed his mother in the same moment. Then they dragged both bodies through the streets of Rome. They threw his corpse into the Tiber. Rome had now killed 5 emperors in 25 years. The crown had become a death warrant, and the men who wanted it kept getting younger and stranger. But the worst humiliation in Roman imperial history was still 40 years away. And it wouldn't come from a Praetorian dagger. It would come from a Persian king who decided he wanted a Roman emperor as a personal footstool. He was the only Roman emperor in history to be captured alive in battle. He spent his final years as a personal slave to the man who'd defeated him. And when he died, his skin was peeled off, stuffed, and displayed in a Persian temple for 200 years. Valerian became emperor in 253 AD, during the worst stretch of the crisis of the 3rd century. The empire was being attacked on every frontier simultaneously: Goths in the Balkans, Franks on the Rhine, and in the east, a new Persian dynasty, the Sassanids, that wasn't just raiding the border. They wanted Roman territory permanently. Valerian marched east to fight the Persian king Shapur I. In 260 AD, near the city of Edessa, the two armies finally met. What happened next is still debated. Some sources say Valerian was defeated in open battle. Others say Shapur seized him during peace negotiations under flag of truce. Either way, a reigning Roman emperor was now a Persian prisoner. Shapur paraded him in chains. He used Valerian as a living mounting block, stepping on the emperor's back to climb his horse. When Valerian died, Shapur had his body flayed, tanned, stuffed, and hung in the main temple of his capital. It stayed there for 2 centuries. Rome never recovered the body. Valerian's son Gallienus refused to negotiate, refused to ransom, refused even to acknowledge the disaster. The empire fragmented. For 13 years, Rome had 3 rival emperors at the same time. It took a peasant from the Danube, a soldier named Aurelian, to put the pieces back together. By then, the empire Caesar had founded was gone. 7 emperors, 7 different ways to die. None of them were killed by enemies of Rome. All of them were killed by Romans. The empire that conquered the Mediterranean spent 500 years killing itself and never figured out how to stop, which brings us to the 7 civil wars that almost finished the job. Next video. If this is the history you want more of, subscribe and tell me in the comments, which of these 7 deaths do you think hit Rome hardest?